Welcome to the People Chronicles. Today my guest is Dr. Patricia Anewalt. Dr. Anewalt is a grief counselor and the director of Pathway Center for Grief and Loss, which is, I think, a part of the hospice and community care in Lancaster.
That's right.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining me today, Patty.
Sure. My pleasure.
All right. Now, we begin each program on the People Chronicles with the question is, what is it that you want the listeners to take away from our discussion today?
I guess I'd say just about everyone everywhere is grieving over something, and yet it's something that nobody ever seems to talk about. So much of what people struggle with is actually very normal. They're having very normal reactions to something that's very difficult in their lives. So I guess I hope that people will come away feeling affirmed and reassured that even if they're in a very difficult spot at the moment, that they will heal and get through it and feel better.
Oh, that's a good thought, because I think that, I know in my life, I've been through it. I know in your life you have been through it as well. And probably a lot of the listeners have been through a time of grief or loss. And we tend to keep it to ourselves, really, many, many, many times.
Well, and there's even, I am a grief counselor, and the bulk of what I do in my day job is helping people cope with the loss through a death. But there are so many other losses that people don't even recognize are losses. They're really what we call secondary losses. And so if people don't understand even what they're going through, it's pretty hard to figure out what they need to do about it.
Yeah, I want to find out how you got to this path, but I want to pick up on that term that you used just now, a secondary loss. What did you mean by that?
Actually, just last week or two ago, we had a support group of grieving teenagers, and what we had them do is each of them were coming to the group because they had lost somebody they cared about in their lives. But we had each of them write down on stickies, take a few minutes, and each of them, on every sticky, they wrote another loss as a result of the loss of the death. And then what was very powerful about it is we had an easel, and one at a time, the teens would go up and put stickies, all the stickies they'd kind of written, and they had several for their losses, and they'd put them on the easel and just talk about, like the holidays are difficult because the person is gone, or now they don't have anybody to go camping with, or financially there's difficulties because the breadwinner had died, or whatever. So the secondary losses are all the other things that we grieve as a result of the main loss that people tend to be more aware of. And those are just as important to be aware of and understand what they need to do to kind of cope and get through that.
Oh, that's what you meant.
Yeah.
Yeah, I never thought of it in that term. Okay, so now is really the question is, why in the world would you go into this line of business?
A lot of people think that. And they say, how could you be a grief counselor?
Really?
Actually, it's a very powerful opportunity to be with people at a very difficult time in their lives, but we're all much more resilient than we realize we are. So to companion somebody, to walk alongside them and kind of, I often describe it as actually like throwing out a life raft, as people feel that they're drowning and they're overwhelmed and they don't know how they're going to get through a difficult time. And basically we kind of lend them the hope, the conviction that you will get through this, and life is worth living, and you'll find other things to still find life worth living about. So we walk alongside people, and we have the privilege of seeing them discover the inner strengths that they have and the new insights that they gain, and they come out on the other side very appreciative of that support. And we didn't do a whole lot. We just kind of walked with them. They're the ones that do the hard work of figuring out what they need to do.
So when you graduated high school, did you say, I'm going to be a grief counselor?
Good question. No, I had no idea what I wanted to do.
Okay, so how did you get from the high school diploma to the PhD in wait a minute,
health administration?
In health administration. Okay, how did you go there?
I was undecided after I went through college. I had an undergraduate degree in sociology, and I'm just always fascinated by theories and how people work. And I ended up going to graduate school for rehabilitation counseling. And really what rehabilitation counseling is helping people figure out how to cope with significant physical losses. So I worked with people who would never walk again, spinal cord injured young men, stroke patients, brain injured. So as I helped people like that, and I worked at a major medical center, do the same thing, basically figure out how they live with this huge loss in their life of physical disability. It really was wonderful preparation to go into the field of hospice, where basically I'm helping people cope with end of life and living without a person they care about. So it's very similar. So it was good preparation for that. So in answer to your question, it's very, trying trying to think what the word is, very rewarding to see people discover their own inner strengths and come out on the other side. And basically, so many grieving people embrace life so much more because they've been through such a difficult time in their lives that they really are re-energized to appreciate what they have while they have it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I read here that you're a certified thanatologist. Is that, am I saying it right?
Actually, I just came back from my annual conference with
Say the word for me.
Thanatology.
Thanatology.
Thanatology is the study of death, dying, and bereavement. And I'm actually just newly coming onto the board of directors for this organization called the Association for Death Education and Counseling. So that's where all of us thanatologists gather.
There are many, I
There are
assume?
many. We had a record-breaking, almost 700 people from all over the world actually come. And we gather once a year at an annual conference.
Wow. As you know, I lost a parent when I was very young. I lost my father when I was 4 years old. And there was not really a lot of education. I think I was told that my dad died, and then it was get up the next day and go to school almost, you know. And I know in your life, too, as well, you lost a parent early on. How old were you when you...
I was 33 when my mother died.
You were 33 when your mom died, which is young, I mean, by today's standards anyway. So I have this... this utmost respect for what you do, because I also know that you run a camp for children.
We've made some wonderful inroads in the last 20 years in terms of supporting grieving families. So yes, I've heard so many stories such as yours. Just coming back from this conference, actually, many of the thanatologists there, there was one presentation I went to where they spoke of their own personal history and how that led them to the work that they do. So there were a couple of them that spoke of losing parents as a young child, and there were no services. So much of what we've learned in the research in recent years is the importance of working with families and educating the adults. It's not always parents who end up raising grieving children, but educating the adults in how to support grieving children. And so much of it is about being open and grieving together and helping the child get through it. Because what happens with children is they intuitively know that in your case, your mom was grieving the death of your dad, and so even if your mom had been more open about it, most children work very hard to not talk about or ask questions to the adult because they don't want to upset them. So you end up having adults and children grieving separately rather than together to get through it. So we've come a long way because now we have, many, many children that we work with, both at our camps as well as throughout the school year, as well as in the schools. So I do a lot of work in the schools educating teachers and counselors on how to support grieving children so they don't feel alone. There's even a Children's Grief Awareness Day now on the Thursday before Thanksgiving every year. And the focus of that is to inform schools and let kids know when they're in schools that they're not the only ones going through it.
Great. I know that we had spoken also that you were saying that the May, June
Time of year.
Yeah, time of year is tough for people who are grieving. Why do you think that is?
Because in May and June there's graduations, there's weddings, there's what else? There's weddings. Oh, Mother's Day and Father's Day. So it's a time of year when families gather and have a lot of traditions that they usually celebrate together as families. So when one person has died in that family, there's a huge void. And sometimes people who are grieving may have lost their loved one, say, last October. And now it's been many months. They've gotten through the holidays, which is another difficult time. So people, when they're grieving, expect they're going to get better and better and better. And they're sort of surprised when, as the year goes by in that first year, actually, they kind of bottom out sometimes at 6 or 9 months along the way, or when they hit a new season or a bunch of different special days, and they wonder, what's wrong with me? Everybody else is coping well, and it's been many months. I must not be grieving properly. So much of what our work with people is to help them realize that they're not alone.
Okay, we'll be back in just a second.